Buenos días de nuevo. Mi nombre es Eduardo Chávez. Como parte del equipo de Viva Operador, les damos la más cordial bienvenida a esta tercera sesión de Aprenda, Cocina y Gane. Hoy tenemos una receta espectacular desde un lunch tan espectacular como la receta y como los que hemos podido observar hasta el momento. Les damos primero que todo, de nuevo, muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros de nuevo en esta tercera sesión. Desde ya les recuerdo que la otra semana tenemos la próxima sesión de Aprenda, Cocina y Gane y seguimos con esta maravillosa experiencia gastronómica de cocina africana. Así que muchas gracias. Para hoy tenemos una receta desde el espectacular Kapama Karula Lodge en Sudáfrica que ahorita les vamos a presentar en un pequeño video. Tenemos un menú completo de 3 tiempos con postre incluido. Desde ya les aviso que van a quedar con hambre al final de la presentación, de antojarse, por lo menos a mí me pasó, de solo ver las recetas. Y de nuevo, dentro de las indicaciones, como para los que ya han estado con nosotros, por favor, si tienen alguna pregunta a lo largo de la presentación, la pueden ir dejando en el chat y al final habilitamos una sección de preguntas y respuestas. Y les voy a pedir, por favor, que si pueden silenciar sus micrófonos, se los agradezco para pues, que podamos escuchar bien la presentación. Por un tema de horario, la sesión de hoy la tenemos grabada, entonces es muy importante lo del tema del el sonido. De igual manera, la receta las vamos a estar compartiendo con ustedes una vez terminada la presentación del día de hoy. Las personas que reciben por la misma manera, las personas que recibieron el link de enlace para esta sesión. De nuevo, si alguien por alguna razón recibió la invitación a esta sesión y no por otra vía diferente al mail, me pueden escribir al correo info@vivaoperador.com para, una vez terminada la sesión, mandarles también la respectiva receta y ser parte, que ahora se los voy a estar mencionando aquí en el chat. Entonces, sin más, y antes de presentar a Lady, que nos va a estar dando una pequeña introducción del campamento y contándonos un poquito de dónde vamos a estar hoy, vamos a ver primero que todo un video del espectacular Kapama Karula Lodge en Sudáfrica. Muchas gracias y buenos días. Bueno, después de ver ese video maravilloso del lodge, de donde vamos a ver la preparación de la receta, los dejo con Lady, que nos va a estar contando un poquito más de la experiencia del día de hoy. Así que buenos días, Lady.
Buenos días a todos, gracias Eduardo. Como ya les comentó Eduardo, esta es una grabación la que vamos a pasar hoy. Este es un campamento Kapama Karula. Este se encuentra en una extensa reserva natural de Kapama Game Reserve y son 12 vías, 12 lujosas vías que están en una reserva privada. El campamento nos hizo la grabación debido a que ahorita estamos en invierno en la parte de Sudáfrica. Entonces, me gustó mucho esta receta porque una de las preguntas que nos hacen frecuentemente cuando hacemos presentaciones de África es ¿qué comen en África? ¿Cuál es la comida que sirven en África? Para los que nos han seguido en las presentaciones anteriores, se han dado cuenta que nos han hecho platillos típicos del lugar. Entonces, como les digo yo siempre, en África se come espectacular. Sí, y se come de todo. Ya hicimos una parrillada africana, hicimos la anterior fue un guisado de rabo, espectacular también. Entonces, ahora es una receta algo diferente, pero África es un destino que se come de toda comida, es comida internacional para responder esa pregunta. Pero siempre con ese toque africano, ese cariño que le pone la gente africana. Entonces vamos a, como les comentaba Eduardo, esta es una receta completa que nos han grabado. Vamos a tener entrada, pan, plato fuerte, ensalada, postre. O sea, aquí se pueden dar gusto, usar su imaginación. Y sin más, pues vamos a la transmisión del video.
Un momento, ya vamos a estar compartiendo el video que en unos segunditos.
¿Sí lo escuchan?
Ok, listo. Vamos a iniciar de nuevo con el video. Ahí nos disculpan, pero vamos a tratar de para probar a ver si acá lo podemos ver un poco mejor. Me confirman nada más a través del chat si lo pueden ver bien una vez que lo comparta.
Welcome to Kapama. Today, me, Fasti, and Maki will show you how to prepare a 3-course lunch from our Karula menu. You can prepare this at home for your friends and family. Because the bread takes the longest, we're going to start with that first. I like this bread and that it uses cake flour because then you don't have
Dios mío.
This sugar helps for the yeast to start growing and activating and brewing your bread a little bit faster. The yeast we are using is instant yeast. That just ensures the best success. The thing with instant yeast though is your bread doesn't stay fresh for as long as it would with fresh yeast. So if you bake a large batch as we do today, freeze your leftover rolls on the same day and you can just defrost them and warm them for a few minutes in the oven again and they are as fresh as you baked it on the same day. So that is a little trick. So you can even bake this bread the day before your dinner and nobody will be the wiser. So our yeast goes in. So that's all our dry ingredients, and with clean hands, you mix all of these dry ingredients together. And then we make a little well in the center. And in there we pour our oil. This is 80 milliliters of olive oil. You can use other oils. I use olive oil and that makes this bread also a vegan bread. But I have made this bread before with bacon fat or any meats and use the pan drippings. And that just gives the bread a very nice flavor. So this bread is so diverse, you can do so much with it. And also 650 milliliters of lukewarm water. If you are in a cold climate, you might want to do this water a little bit warmer, as warm as you can handle it. Because we're using instant yeast, the warm water won't harm the yeast because it's more of a to this sticky dough. There we go. I'm going to turn it out onto the surface now. And I'm going to get as much of the dough out as I can. So there's still a little bit of the dough stuck in the bowl, but we'll get to that just now. I would like to show you the kneading technique that I learned from one of my trainee friends when I was at cooking school. I think a lot of us know the kneading technique where you knead with closed fists, but you want your dough to move as much as possible. So you open your hands and you move as much of your dough around. So what is the purpose of actually kneading dough? And when do you know when you've done enough kneading? If you keep watching this dough as I'm kneading, you can see that it's slowly starting to release from the surface. It's slowly starting to come together as a ball. And that is the gluten in the flour developing. And this is what we want, because this will make your rolls keep their shape as they are proving and keep them from cracking in the oven when you are baking. Almost there. I find that bread doughs that are softer, like this one, that's got a lot of liquid, also proves easier than bread doughs that are quite firm. And this is indeed quite a workout. As you can see here, as I'm rolling this dough, the gluten is very well developed. It's picking all these little pieces of dough up from the surface where I need it, and that gives you a sign that our dough is pretty much there. So now with the dough on my hands, I am removing these last little pieces in the bowl. I'm going to use the same bowl to prove the dough. And I'm going to use this last little bit of oil that's left in this bowl to line this bowl so that our dough ball doesn't stick while it is proving. I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap and leave it to prove. In a warm climate, it will take about 30 minutes. In a cooler climate, about 45 minutes. And once we've reached that point, I'm going to show you a few interesting shapes for our lunch. And I'll also tell you a few other interesting things we can do with this dough.
And now, while we're waiting for the bread to prove, we're going to start making our salad dressing. And it's one of those things, you make it nice early on time and put it on the side. It also helps with the anchovies and all the flavors to come up. And then our ingredients, so we've got the roasted garlic. We also use roasted garlic instead of the fresh garlic. Normally everybody goes with the fresh garlic, but we're just trying to run away from that strong flavor of garlic. So we go with the garlic. And then mustard. We've got egg yolks. Then anchovies. Olive oil. And a bit of lemon juice. And then from here, we're going to blend everything for about 30 seconds. It's going to start emulsifying. And from there, we're going to start adding the vegetable oil, quite on a slow process. This is emulsified already a bit. So now we're going to go with the olive oil, with the vegetable oil, quite slowly. Just get the spatula, mix a bit, because some of the oil will stay on the side, and then just double check on your consistency. If you feel it's a little bit too thick, you're going to add a little bit of water, which makes it a bit looser. after adding the water, we've got a bit of a runny consistency, which is nice to dress your leaves because you don't want it too thick as a mayonnaise, or else it's going to be too heavy for the salad leaves. And this now is ready to use. Just transfer into a container for later when you're assembling your salad.
So our dough has finished proving, and now I'm going to show you a few shapes to do for our rolls. As you can see, I did cover it with plastic wrap. It creates a nice moist atmosphere inside that helps the dough to prove faster. If you prove your dough without covering the bowl, it creates a crust on top, and you don't want that. That's going to cause problems when you shape your dough and your rolls later. So I'm going to turn out the dough on a floured surface so that you can see what I'm doing. Now, convention usually have you knead down the dough again at this point, but I like to not do that. It just helps me to shape my rolls easier. And I'm flouring my hands. You can also use a little bit of oil, and that is so that the soft dough doesn't stick to my hands so much, so that I can create neat rolls. And I'm also going to use the flour that I've sprinkled around, and I take little sections of dough and I am pressing the air out as I go. And then I'm using the shape and I'm pressing the dough through my index finger and my thumb to create neat little balls. So that is the first shape, and I'm going to put a few different toppings on the rolls. Now, as I said before, this dough is vegan, so you can use oil on top of your rolls or water to make toppings stick on top of them. Or I also like to use egg white that I just whisk a little bit with a fork just to break the threads in the egg white a little bit, and that acts as a glue to have all the toppings stick to it. And you can use various different kinds of toppings, different seeds or herbs or spices, different kinds of cheese or flours or salts, or anything that you find that's interesting that you think you can put on top of your rolls. And I'm going to show you a few of those. So I am making a few little rolls, and I'll show you the toppings when we transfer them to our pans. So there we have the rolls. So let me show you how to do a knot. We use about the same amount of dough as we would for a roll. Then when you have your roll, you might roll it out to have a long shape. And you need to have the entire surface covered with some flour so it doesn't stick together when you make your knot. And then you just knot it together. Sometimes you can join these two sections, and that gives you a little knot roll like that. I'm going to do one more. There's our roll. And we knot it, and then I join this little section there. And there's a neat little knot roll. With this last piece of bread dough, I want to show you how to make spiral rolls. So it's easy to start this shape, especially when you haven't pressed all the air out. When you make shaped breads, it's much easier to shape bread. Also when you are making pizzas, when there's still air in the dough, because then you can press your dough into shape while you are pressing the air out. So I'm going to flour the surface because we are working with a soft dough. And I'm also going to use my rolling pin. What I want to do here is I want to make a rectangle shape, a long rectangle shape. And I'm going to put a bit of flour on top so that my rolling pin doesn't stick to the dough. And there I have a relatively neat rectangle. And then I'm going to use the egg white and brush the whole inside. If you have a pastry brush, use that. I like working with my hands. And you cover the whole surface with a thin layer of egg white. And then we are going to dust a filling over this. I am going to use dried herbs. You want to use a dark filling because you want to see the spiral shape when you slice through the roll. You want to put enough filling because you want to see your spiral clearly. And I'm staying away from the edge because once I've rolled the spiral, I want it to stick there so that it doesn't unroll while we are baking. There we go. So now I'm carefully going to roll the bread up. And as I go, I'm going to brush some more of the egg white on so that I'm sticking it while I'm rolling. When you make this filling spiral bread, be careful of using fillings like cheese, because that melts and it might make your spiral bread not stick together, so you might have your spiral unrolling. So I would rather work with seeds and spices. Then I'm just applying a last little bit of extra egg white here at the end to make sure that it sticks closed and won't unroll as it's proving or when it's baking. To slice our spiral buns, we need a sharp knife, and I'm tossing it in flour so it doesn't stick to our bread. And carefully cutting through and then transferring them to the pan. And I'm just slightly pressing them down to make sure they're in a nice, neat shape. And then you can check on both sides which side looks the nicest. This one spiral is showing the best, so I'm choosing the best side. When you are making artistic rolls like these ones with the spirals or these little knots, think carefully of how you are going to finish your roll off. I wouldn't sprinkle any further garnishes on top of these rolls. And that's all our spiral rolls. So I'm just going to put a little bit of egg white. And these little knots. So I have some rock salt here, and this is smoked paprika. When I put multiple toppings on a roll, I choose the coarsest one first, because once you start with a fine topping, it creates a barrier between the sticky part so that the coarse toppings don't stick. So start with your coarse toppings first, and then you finish with your finer toppings afterwards. So we are making vegan smoked paprika and rock salt rolls here. I like the smell of smoked paprika, so I'm going to put quite a bit of it on here. And then the last ones are for cheese rolls. So they are going to get a bit of egg again, and that is to make the cheese stick to them. I put the cheese on them once they are on the pan. So if any pieces fall to the side, it's still going to bake against the little roll. And now that all our bread dough has been shaped into our rolls, I'm going to cover the pans lightly with plastic wrap again to create that little moist atmosphere in here to help them proof.
Smoking tomatoes is a very easy process. You need tomatoes, you need wood smoking chips, you need a pot and a strainer to place your tomatoes. So the process is quite easy. Take your wood chips, just pour in a pot. Then got the strainer down the side. Got some tomatoes here that we're going to just cut them in half. Place them in the strainer facing upwards. The whole reason for the tomatoes to face upwards is when smoking, all the juices doesn't go down. We want to preserve those juices in the tomato. So, while our tomatoes are all facing upwards, just in the pot, cover with your lid. Then just take this into a stove. I'm going to put it on the stove. Then from this process, we smoke the tomatoes for about 25 minutes and then we allow them to sit for another 15 minutes just to allow the rest of the smoke to infuse into the tomatoes. And I'm just going to open and see all the tomatoes. So, always be careful of your handle, which is hot. And the tomatoes now are nice and soft. I'm going to put one on the thing. And at this stage, it's going to be even easier to remove the skin. Just put the tweezer or tongs because it's still a bit hot so that you don't burn yourselves. And then from here, just chop your tomatoes and then it's ready for your risotto.
And here are our finished product, our completed rolls. This is what they should look like. Here are our spiral rolls. These are the cheese buns. These are our nuts. And these are our smoked paprika and salt rolls. And I've prepared some butter to have with this. This one is with a bit of the smoked tomato from the risotto. I've softened the butter to room temperature. I've seasoned it with a bit of salt and pepper and I've chopped some of the tomato and mixed it in. This one is a roasted garlic butter. I've mashed some roasted garlic. I've softened the butter as well and seasoned it with salt and pepper and mixed it with the mashed garlic and made little canals with them. And here I've sprinkled a little bit of Sichuan pepper over.
Okay, and now we've got our dressing ready. So we're going to start assembling our salad. We're going to put about 4 tablespoons of the dressing into the leaves. Then sprinkle some bacon. And then croutons, and leave some of the croutons to put on top for an extra crunch. And then we're going to grate some parmesan as well. And then get everything mixed together. And now we've got our salad nicely mixed, so we're going to start presenting the salad. So I've chosen a flat plate to use, and then you can also use a bowl, any plate you prefer, and then you present on the way on what makes you happy, but I prefer the flat plate. So we're just going to go with our presentation. Take a little bit more of the dressing on the plate. Then just start assembling your leaves. Then now we're going to start adding the quail eggs, the anchovies, and also put more parmesan on top. Yes, sprinkle a little bit of bacon and then grate some parmesan. Okay, we've got some sea salt for seasoning and some black pepper. And then from here, basically, you've got your salad ready. Okay, now we're going to start by making our risotto. To start with the risotto, we're going to start with sauteing onions, and then we get some oil in the pan. And then a nub of butter. And then go with the onions. Then we're going to saute this on a medium heat so that the onions don't get burning on the sides. So we're going to saute the onions, which is going to take about 2 to 3 minutes, and then they're going to start looking transparent. And then when we get to that stage, and then we're going to add our risotto. And then for now, so stir them occasionally so that they don't burn on the sides. And then I'm just going to stir again, and then there's already now some aromas that are coming up, and then you can start feeling that your onions basically are getting cooked, are getting closer to the stage that we need. We're going to start picking up all those aromas when we get to that stage. And then like now, just needs to go for another 30 to 45 seconds. Okay. Stirring again, and now they're starting, like now they've got that nice look that we're looking for. And then we add our risotto. And then just stir it slightly. We're gonna let this go for about 20 seconds, 15 to 20 seconds. Over here we've got a beautiful wooded Chardonnay that goes very well with the risotto. Also the woodiness of it also helps to add on the flavor. You can use any wooded Chardonnay. We use that to deglaze a bit. Let's give it a bit of a stir. And then from here, just allow your wine to cook all the way so that when the risotto is ready, it doesn't taste too much of the wine. So it's very important to cook all the wine. So I'm just gonna stir just again a little bit. And also, while you're waiting for your wine to cook down, you can have that remaining wine, the remainder of the wine, have the sips. It's also gonna help you to enjoy the atmosphere, the cooking. And you know, with a glass of wine, you even become a better cook. And right now, we've got all the wine being cooked away. And then from this moment, we're gonna start adding our vegetable stock. Also with the vegetable stock, we're gonna add in about 100 mils at a time. So right there, we've got about 100 mils. Then give it a bit of a stir again. Allow that to cook down. And about 20 seconds to 30 seconds later, just give it a slight stir. And it's always important to use a spatula, which is a very soft spoon. You don't want to break the grains of the rice. So that's one of the reasons we're using a rubber spatula. It works very well because you don't want to break the rice. And also not to stir your rice constantly. And now our stock is starting to run down. So we're just going to allow it to go down. And then you're going, there it goes. So it's nicely down now. So we chop again with about 100 mils of the vegetable stock. And then also again, just you leave your rice a bit to cook. And basically this is the process you're going to repeat about 5 to 6 or 7 times until your rice is cooked. And now it's about 12 minutes later. And our rice is perfectly cooked. It's almost where we want it. Now at this stage, now we're going to start finishing up our risotto, where we're going to be adding the tomatoes, the cheese, the cream. So like now, you get the smoked tomatoes that we smoked earlier on. We add that in. And fold that in. And then we're also going to use, and then add some cream. And one of the main reasons we're using cream now, moving from stock to the wood from the smoking of the tomatoes, the cream helps to cut that so that it's not too smoky. So we just put a small amount of cream to start with. Mix that a bit. And then I'm going to allow this to go for about a minute just to get all the flavors into the rice, cooking slowly. And then while we have this, we also have some nice cherry tomatoes which we're going to use for assembling our risotto. We're going to start cutting this. We're going to start cutting the things we need to assemble while we're waiting for that to cook, because now we're more at the stage where we're finishing up, so you want all your things ready. So just going to cut our tomatoes to decorate. Throw that in again. Okay, and then we are going to, now we've got some butter here, leftover butter. We add a number of butter. Bread cheese. But this is our stage where we're finishing off the risotto to start to season it. Then also have some parmesan, which we're going to grate it in. Throw that in. And then we season with some salt, or some sea salt that we're using for seasoning. And some black pepper. Just a bit. Wow, that's perfect. That's how exactly we want it to be. And from this stage, switch off your stove. And then basically we are ready to assemble. Okay, and now our risotto is finished. And if you look on the risotto, it might look to be a lot, but this is for 4 people. Also for plating, actually I'm using 2 plates. I'm using a bowl and a flat plate. As it's always basically depends on you, on what you want to do, on which plate you use it. It's quite flexible on what to plate on. So go in your bowl first. In the bowl. And then we're going to put some Parmesan crisp for an extra texture on the plate. So we've got 3 pieces. And then we've got some cherry tomatoes that we cut earlier on as well. We add that on the plate. And then some fresh basil leaves. Then a little bit of basil oil. Then we're going to finish with some grated Parmesan. And micro herbs.
For dessert, we are doing a dark chocolate fondant with a marshmallow filling. So I'm going to start with the dark chocolate and the butter. I've already warmed some water. I've taken it off of the stovetop so that we don't overheat the chocolate. And I'm placing this chocolate and butter together over the heat. We have 92 grams of chocolate, dark chocolate, and 90 grams of butter together in this little bowl. And the bottom of the bowl is not touching the water. If it touches, it might make the cocoa butter in the chocolate split, and then you are going to struggle to bring your whole mixture together again. So while I explain the rest of the ingredients to you and the mold, we're going to leave this aside to slowly melt. It's important when you make a chocolate fondant that you have everything you need ready before you start. Because there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and it's a little bit technically advanced. So we are going to use a Dariel mold today. This dessert very easily sticks to the mold after it's baked, and the center is runny. So if it sticks, it's very difficult to get it out. So the way I line my molds is I rub a rather thick layer of butter inside the mold. At the bottom, I put a little piece of baking paper, and then I spray the inside of the mold as well, non-stick food spray. And then I put them aside until my mixture is ready. And then just before I start piping my mixture into my mold, I also, for a last bit, spray it again. So my molds are ready. If you do not have Dariel molds at home, you can use other things that you have at home as molds. We have very successfully baked our fondants in little glass jars before, or coffee cups or little espresso cups. They are relatively thick because we are going to put them directly in the oven. So make sure that if you are using anything made out of glass, that it's not a thin glass that's going to burst in the oven. And it's important that the top of your item you are using is wider than the bottom. Something like this will not work because it's narrower at the top, so you are going to struggle to turn it out. These will all work very nicely to turn out. While your chocolate and your butter is melting, you can occasionally give it a bit of a stir so that the parts that have melted comes to the top, and you bring the butter and chocolate to the bottom to get a bit of heat. We've also made some marshmallows, caramel marshmallows, that we use in our lodges for various snacks, and we are going to put some of these in the center of our fondants. You can use other marshmallows, those will work perfectly fine, but I do find that homemade marshmallows melt easier inside a chocolate fondant. And they're very nice because they remind you a little bit of the American s'mores. Our other ingredient we are going to add in here, apart from the chocolate and the butter, we have 17 grams of cake flour, 67 grams of caster sugar, and 3 eggs. These are large eggs. Once this chocolate has melted, we are going to add all these ingredients in here, mix it all together. When you mix it, what you want to do is not to whip it too much. We don't want to include too much air. We just want to mix it until all the ingredients are combined. We have to make sure here that all the chocolate and butter is melted so that we don't have little pockets of chocolate in our fondants. For this recipe, it is very important that you use a very high quality dark chocolate. That is going to help for the fondant to keep its shape. This recipe will give you exactly 4 chocolate fondants. So if you want to make more, you just increase your recipe. It is completely melted, so now we are removing this from the heat. I'm going to start using a whisk now, and we're adding all our other ingredients. Flour goes in, and the sugar, and our eggs. And we only mix until all the ingredients are incorporated, and then we stop mixing. We do not want to overmix. And then I'm going to pour this into a piping bag. I'm going to give my molds one last spray. First, we are going to pipe a little bit of the mixture in the base of the molds, just to coat the base. Then we are going to pop our marshmallows in and then top up the mold with the rest of the mixture. Now we are going to pop these in the oven at 180 degrees for about 8 minutes. So let's go to the oven.
Bueno, yo no sé ustedes, pero por lo menos yo tengo hambre. Y de no ser porque me faltan algunos ingredientes, tal vez me hubiera animado a hacer el risotto para el almuerzo, pero mejor cuando podamos viajamos todos a África, vamos al Kapama Lodge y lo probamos allá. Creo que es una mejor idea para todos. Pues darle las gracias por esta participación de ustedes acá con todos nosotros. Realmente disfrutamos muchísimo, por lo menos yo y sé que muchas personas disfrutamos muchísimo de esta receta. No sé si tienen alguna pregunta. Correcto, hasta con postre incluido, por ahí nos comentan, ese postre se veía delicioso y también, por lo menos yo quedé antojado también. No sé si alguien tiene alguna pregunta respecto a la receta. Gracias a ustedes también por estar acá con nosotros. Darle las gracias a las personas de diferentes países que han estado con nosotros. También, por supuesto, a todos los amigos de las agencias de aquí de Guatemala y de otros países que han estado con nosotros. Recuerden que nos pueden... estén atentos para la próxima semana que vamos a estar en directo transmitiendo en simultáneo la receta desde Zambia. Correcto, Lady. Vamos a estar desde Zambia.
Sí, sí, correcto. Próxima semana, miércoles, un poquito más temprano por ser en directo, acuérdense el cambio de horario, pero vamos a estar transmitiendo en vivo desde las famosas Cataratas Victoria, vamos a estar viajando un poquito. Es una sorpresa la receta, pero les estaremos enviando tal como se las han enviado, les estarán enviando esta nueva receta que hicimos hoy y las próximas. Y por favor, si ya tienen sus platos, envíenos, acuérdense que tenemos premios. Nada más agradecerles que estén participando y sigamos viajando.
Gracias, Lady. Bueno, nada más nos hacían ahí una pregunta, que cómo se llamaba el lugar de hoy. Se llamaba Kapama Lodge desde Sudáfrica.
Sí, está ubicado en la reserva de Kapama, justo al lado de Kruger Park. Es parte de
Gracias,
Kruger
Lady.
Park.
Y muchas gracias a todos, así que estén atentos para la invitación de la próxima semana, la van a estar recibiendo entre hoy y mañana sin falta. Y recuerden, la próxima semana en directo de las Cataratas Victoria en Zambia, miércoles a las 9 de la mañana, porque vamos en vivo. Así que muchas gracias y buenas tardes para todos.
Buen día a todos.